Good evening, everyone. And I see Patrick and Warrior Class 3 are in here right now. I know Patrick said he wouldn't be able to make the whole thing because he's working, but that's cool. I guess he snuck in for a little bit. I've got Tom Martz on the line, so let me start the recording and we'll get this show on the road. All right, folks, and we're back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks so much for joining me again this week. And this week I am happy to be joined by Tom Martz from the Locke and Smith Foundation. And now Tom's going to tell you a lot more about himself and what he does, but I'll give you just a little bit of a descriptor. The man knows the Missouri state constitution literally like the back of his hand. And so we're going to talk about that and many other things. Mr. Martz, how are you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm living the dream, I guess. So I guess to start things off, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your foundation that you've got going on.
Well, the Locke and Smith Foundation was actually started back in 2008. It was originally named the Young Conservatives. Young was an acronym which stood for Yesterday's Oath Under Noble Guardians. It was going to be a group that it was viewed as it was going to define what a conservative is. And I found it quite odd when it first got rolling. There were more libertarians involved in it than there were actual conservatives. And it was put together by our local talk show host from KSGF, a man by the name of Vincent David Jericho. He got the ball rolling, and we formed committees, and we had all kinds of different meetings. We had speakers come in, and we met every Wednesday, and it was nothing for there to be 200-300 people at one of these meetings. And what ended up happening is I got elected by the membership to the board of directors, and they appointed me as the head of the legislative committee because I had already been following city council agenda items and been going to city council meetings for the previous 3 years. So I actually got to watch and view how government functions, how it works. I got familiar with how the city of Springfield worked. I delved into the city charter. I realized at that point in time, after doing some constitutional review type stuff in other states, how much authority and power that the people voted away from themselves to give to city council members. And that pretty much, we ended up with a committee. The idea of the committee was that they were going to write legislation to get the state of Missouri more liberty, freedom, free market oriented. And what I found out is nobody in the committee understood A, legislation, B, they never delved or looked into the fact that you had to write legislation to get rid of legislation, and none of them understood the Missouri Constitution. So we delved into the first year, we looked at every bill that made it to the governor's desk. And what we did is we looked at the bill, then searched the Missouri Constitution and said, where do they get the authority to pass this on to the people of the state? And then we graded their voting record. Did you vote constitutionally or did you not? And that pretty much right now is the complete purpose of the Locke and Smith Foundation. We review every single piece of legislation that has made it to the phase of third read and passed. And then we grade the legislators on how they have voted on it. We grade it in accordance with the Missouri Constitution. And since 2010, we've been awarding what has been called the Locke and Smith Granite Plaque to the most constitutionally voting member of the state assembly, one in the Senate and one in the House. And the governor can actually win the Senate award if he vetoes or signs enough constitutional, unconstitutional legislation to score enough points to knock off whoever won in the Senate. That was a short abbreviated edition.
Well, okay, so I guess my first question is, how many hours do you, I mean, every legislative session, how many hours do you pour in to doing this? Because, I mean, the amount of bills that just get read in is crazy. I mean, how much time, I mean, good Lord.
Starting in February, as soon as like the first 5 bills, whether it be the House or Senate, don't make a difference, but when the first 5 bills hit what's the truly third read and passed, which means it passed the original chamber that it was introduced in, and it's getting ready to go to the other chamber, we start reviewing from that point every Wednesday. So we start about mid-February, third week of February, and we go every single Wednesday probably until about the end of August.
Dang. You guys are busy.
There's literally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of research in this little pet project that we've taken upon ourselves.
Now, how many volunteers, I mean, roundabout number, how many volunteers do you have helping you all with this?
Well, it fluctuates. We've been as high as somewhere in the mid-30s, and we have been as low as, of course, you got different meetings, but I think right now we're at a consistent between 8 to about 12.
Ooh.
But we had, at one point in time, we had like 30 some odd people. You know, people get burned out doing this. So after about 2 or 3 years, they just kind of basically throw up their hands and say, what's the purpose? What's the use? But I've got to hand it to one of the individuals. There are 2 original members of this legislative committee. I'm one of them, and a lady by the name of Nancy is another one. She's been in this from the very beginning. And, you know, we just show up every Wednesday. We look at the bills as they are read, and then we determine. I mean, we've all been doing this long enough now that we can pick out pretty quickly whether or not it's constitutional, because I've got parts of the Constitution embedded in my memory. And I could pretty much say, well, that's a violation of that section because the original title was this. Then they changed the title to this to make it so that they could put this, this, and this in the bill. It's unconstitutional.
Okay, I want to I want to delve into this real quick, and then I've got a couple of questions from some live stream viewers. But because I'm uneducated on this, and I have to fix that, I have to remedy that situation. But so when you talk about the title of a bill and then things are added, are we talking that a bill should only contain one thing and that's it? Nothing, you know, not piling other things in order for it to be constitutional?
Right. They call it log rolling up there, but in Article 3, Section 21 of the Missouri Constitution, the original title, you can't change the title away from its original purpose. Kind of like Senate Bill 262, the gas tax bill that everyone just absolutely loves. The original title of that bill was about a gas tax. Well, somewhere through the committee process, before it got sent to the floor to be voted upon, they changed the title to about transportation. Well, you can loosely say that transportation and gas tax are somewhat similar if you really want to stretch that elastic. But the reason they did that is because the bill was no longer about a gas tax. All of a sudden, there's this electronic vehicle task force that's being created and put into that piece of legislation. There was also a component that if you have a CDL and you're convicted of human trafficking, you will have your CDL revoked for the rest of your life. To any common sense person who has any type of brain function up there, they're going to ask themselves, okay, what does electric vehicle task force have to do with a gas tax? And what does the human trafficking component with a CDL have anything to do with a gas tax? They specifically changed the title to allow for those two components to be put into that bill. And in reality, they had nothing to do with the gas tax to begin with. The bill was unconstitutional, as the Constitution is written.
That's, yeah, I remember you talking about that at Catherine's campaign event. You know, I guess if again, I don't agree with it, but I guess the way a politician is going to look at that is like, oh, well, if we keep getting these electric vehicles and people aren't going to be pumping gas anymore, and then we're going to lose money, and now we got to figure out another way to get money because of all the electric vehicles or whatever stupid things go through their head. I mean, I'm just trying to come up with a way that it's hard to follow how they think sometimes. It really is.
Well, that's why I was trying to be polite with the elasticity of the title going from gas tax to transportation. But once you start looking at the bill, and you have to ask yourself, what does the human trafficking component with a CDL have to do with a gas tax?
Right.
Absolutely nothing. So if you can't, as a legislator, open up Article 3 and read Section 21 and read Section 23, it specifically says that no bill shall be so amended in its passage through either house as to change its original purpose. What did they do? They changed its original purpose. They wanted to raise revenue via the gas tax. The human trafficking component with the CDL changed its original purpose.
Oh.
These things were put in here in all reality. These things were put in here to make it so that governing a free people would be incredibly difficult. But if you're just going to ignore it, it makes governing a free people extremely easy.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly. I mean, you know, going on about the gas tax, yeah, I mean, it wasn't enough that the people voted it down 3 times, and yet they're hell-bent on getting this gas tax pushed through, and then they do it unconstitutionally. So just adding insult to injury, I guess you'd say.
Well,
go ahead.
The other component that I really like, and I really didn't look at the language that way until I was talking to Tony Levesco up at Catherine's event, where if you read the section where they raise the gas tax, it appears that the first gas tax is going to be 2.5 cents. The next one's going to be a nickel. The next one's going to be 7.5 cents. The next one's going to be 10 cents. You know, because they don't talk about they're adding 2.5 cents, they're adding 2.5 cents, they're adding 2.5 cents, they're adding 2.5 cents. It specifically says the first gas tax increase will be 2.5 cents. Then the next one says it will be 5 cents. Well, is that 5 cents plus the 2.5 cents, or is it 2.5 cents plus 2.5 cents equals 5 cents?
That, yeah, because, I mean, now, the way they touted it, you make a good point, because they touted it was going up 2.5 cents a year. But if it's written in another way, then that could be up for, I guess, debate. And they say, well, that's what the bill, you know, if they wanted to raise it a nickel instead of 2.5 cents, they could say that's what the bill language says. That's what we passed. That's horrifying to think about.
You almost have to be, and trust me, my English is not perfect by any means, and my grammar is absolutely horrible. But you almost have to be an English Nazi when you read these pieces of legislation, because it's not going to be the legislators who are implying intent to that language. It's going to be somebody wearing a black robe.
Right. That's what scares me.
And does that individual in the black robe? And there's this group that I help in Oklahoma where I'm reviewing opinions by justices, and they are opinions. So when it comes time for people to speak properly, I wish they would understand they're not a ruling, they're an opinion. But I have read many opinions where the justices have specifically stated that since they were not present while the arguing factoids were being made back and forth about a piece of legislation, it is their implied meaning that it means, and then you're subject to whatever it is that they believe it means, not what the legislators believe it means.
And therein lies the problem. So, I want to get to a few questions real quick. So, we got a question here. It says, "Can you tell everybody the difference between an ordinance and a law?" Because after COVID and everything, there are a lot of ordinances going around, but people said, "Well, that's not a law." What is the difference between an ordinance and a law?
A law is something that is passed by a legislative branch of government. We don't have a legislative branch of government at any political subdivision level other than the state. Anything thereafter is either deemed an ordinance, a rule, or a regulation. I can specifically find nowhere where we, the people, gave deference to the legislative body to give rulemaking, lawmaking, ordinance making authority over to anyone else but them. So when you have these cities that are passing these ordinances or whatever it is that they want to call them, they absolutely do not, per the Missouri Constitution, the contract between the people of the state and the legislators don't have our permission to grant rulemaking, lawmaking, ordinance making authority onto anyone else but them. Period.
Well, that's I mean, after they had that bill where I don't remember if it passed or not, where they were saying, if a city's going to pass some kind of shutdown measures or whatever, it couldn't be longer for than a certain amount of time, and then it'd have to be reviewed. And I know St. Louis County, Sam Page, the little dictator, he got all upset about that. And it's like, well, dude, come on. You don't really have the authority, to be telling businesses to run at a, only 25% capacity or what have you, or telling people they had to hole up in their homes. So, anytime we talk about ordinances right now, my mind goes to what they did during COVID. And so, we passed an ordinance. You can only operate at a certain percentage, or you can't open at all, and you're essential and you're non-essential, and all these other things. And it's like, some of these people are just health department directors. And I know St. Louis County was challenging Sam Page because they said they had the authority to do that. And he was supposed to carry it out, not him make up the rules himself. And I don't ever know what really came out of that. They were going to challenge his authority, and I'm like, good luck with little Hitler in St. Louis. So the next question would be, is there somewhere in the state constitution that gives the assembly the authority to accept federal money?
None, which is why when the first year, 2010, when we did the first annual Locke and Smith Award, there were 85 total pieces of legislation that we looked at, of which were, I think, 26 or 27 of them were appropriations bills. And as you go through each individual appropriation, you determine that at least 40%, if not more, of the appropriation is coming from the federal government. So that makes pretty much all 25, 26, 27, whatever there are appropriation bills unconstitutional because the federal government doesn't have that authority either. So you got to look at both constitutions. So when you've got a state that's just standing there with their hand out going, gimme, 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 let us decide where it's going to go, you end up with the federal government dictating to the state, this is where you're going to spend that money. And by the way, we're going to fully fund this program for like 3 years. And then afterwards, you're going to fully fund it. And we're going to pull our resources back so we can use that same money that we were giving you for that mandate. We're going to give it to you in another way. That way we can mandate something else to you so we can do the same thing to you. We're supposed to have 50 sovereign, independent countries, states, who function fully on their own based on the United States Constitution, which is a contract between the states. We don't have that. We've got a child who basically has told its parents, this is the way you're going to raise me.
Yeah, I mean, you did dead on. Doing a live streams and stuff with the Missouri Freedom Initiative, this is one of the topics they always bring up about the amount of federal money that this state gets. It's like 50% of the money is coming from the feds. And it's like, okay, hey, how do we get away from this? I mean, and where's the money going? Because that's another question. All this money's coming in. Well, what's it going to? What is it funding? It's horrific. Okay, so the next question is it constitutional for the Missouri governor to provide a tax cut for agriculture?
No, that would be covered in Article 1, Section 2 of the Missouri Constitution, which that is where your enumerated rights are contained. You don't have constitutional rights. I hate when people say that. You have rights. If you ever start reading judges' opinions, you'll know why it is that I am so anal about saying I don't have constitutional rights. I have rights which are enumerated in the Constitution, and they are to be secured by the government, because Article 1, Section 2 specifically states that all constitutional government is intended to promote, not provide, to promote the general welfare of the people. And general welfare of the people is in its entirety, not certain segments. That all persons have a natural right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the enjoyment of the gains of their own industries. That all persons are created equal and are entitled to equal rights and opportunity under the law. That to give security to these things is the principal office of government, and that when government does not confer this security, it fails in its chief design. There's a reason that I know it's not Lady Liberty, Lady Justice is blindfolded and the scale sits on a level platform. But if you're going to put ag on one side of that scale and you put nothing on the other side of that scale, ag has benefited completely where no one else has.
Okay. And, I know there's some pushback on the constitutionality of this special session that's coming up because he is looking at these agricultural tax cuts, and he's taking some heat because people are saying, hey, you got to be even Stevens here, buddy. You can't just give it to the ag and forget about everybody else. So there is some heat. We'll see what comes out of this whole thing. Another question is, if a corporation is receiving federal subsidies, can we make it illegal for them to use state eminent domain laws to put in, say, solar farms?
I was just asked a question the other day that involved Article 1, Section 26, and Article 1, Section 28. They're the eminent domain sections in the Missouri Constitution because there appears to have been a bill, HB 2004, I think, maybe 2008, where the government was granting its eminent domain authority over to a private entity for a wind farm, and in exchange for that, they had to put some sort of a electrical grid for the availability for Missouri to draw off of that. And I harken back to Article 1, Section 1, Article 1, Section 2, Article 1, Section 3. The people of the state of Missouri did not give our legislative body any authority for them to grant to any entity outside the government the power of eminent domain. That was one of my screaming points with the extension of the XL pipeline. Trump signed an executive order and said private property rights be damned. We're going to put this thing in whether you like it or whether you don't. If you can't negotiate with a private owner of a piece of private property in good faith at a reasonable rate, don't go to government and expect don't have the government take or blight property or force you from your property in order to get what you want. Tax credits for solar farms are absolutely ludicrous. Same way with wind farms, and most of those they'll blight the property or they'll do something to make it so that it's not economically feasible for the individual who owns that property to maintain it, and then they swoop in like the federal government swoops in with a little bit of cash and a little bit of money and say, hey, we'll make this deal, and this deal for you. And the person who owns the property feels compelled or feels trapped because they know they're going to lose their property if they don't do it.
Yeah, it's sickening. So because we're going with the one of the things that we're going to be fighting for is to eliminate the sales tax on groceries at this special session, and that would be constitutional because that affects pretty much everybody. Correct? I mean, pretty much everybody goes to the grocery store, so it's not.
Well, I don't want to say it's constitutional. I would say that it will put everybody on a level playing field with the people with EBT cards.
Okay, yeah, because it is only for things you can buy with food stamps. So I see your point.
Food stamps, you tell the people before you put anything on the counter that you're using an EBT card, and they remove the tax component from the food. So that would put me, you, everyone else in the state on the same level playing field as anyone who's using an EBT card to not have to pay tax on groceries. Tax on groceries is ludicrous to begin with, but what do I know?
Well, you know a lot, Tom, because you're teaching us all kinds of stuff here. It's Article 126, Article 127, Article 128 are the three areas in our Bill of Rights that deal with the taking of private property. And about a decade ago, I was with a group where we were trying to help, it might be more than a decade ago now, we were trying to help Ron Calzone's Missouri First organization change some verbiage in the Missouri Constitution in a couple of these sections to make it more difficult for the government to come along and just up and eminent domain somebody. And it's been since that time frame where it is not easy to get enough signatures to get something on the ballot by any means. For anyone to say that it is too easy to change the Constitution, they obviously have never worked on a grassroots ballot initiative to try to get enough signatures to qualify to get something done and get something changed in the Missouri Constitution. Yeah, you can do it with unloaded, lots of funds.
but for a grassroots organization to do it is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I do remember. I don't remember how many years ago it was. It's been several years ago. There was a gal in Stanton, Missouri, along with some others, pushing to get rid of the personal property tax and have that put on the ballot, and it fell short. And I mean, it. She tried everything she could because it was her. I believe Gary Nolan was in on it. Some other folks. I might have been a couple legislators, but it fell short, unfortunately. But she was out busting her can trying to get this done. But what bothered me about the whole situation, I was talking to some other people about it, and they said, well, if they don't give their personal property tax, they'll just raise taxes on something else. I'm like, yeah, they might. But don't you think it would be awful nice not to get that tax bill in at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year, not to have, especially for family farms and stuff like that, not to get this cumbersome tax bill in right at the beginning of the year? Like, it's a fine how do you do from your state government. Or, well, I know the bill comes from your county, but the way Senator Eigel made it sound that, like the county I live in, they only get about 15% of that money. The other 85% from our county goes to the state. And he's about every year he introduces a bill to get rid of personal property taxes. And I don't understand the mentality of people on this. It's like they pull out, well, what about the schools and what about police and fire departments? Like, there's 27 states that don't have a personal property tax. Ask them how they're getting it done. Why do we automatically have to poo-poo it because you don't want to, out of 23 states, we're the third highest in the country. That's a problem. But, eminent domain, if you can't get people to sign on to say, yeah, I don't want the government taking my property, that blows my mind.
I would bet that a majority of people who rent see no problem with property taxes.
Yeah, of course.
On anything. That's real estate and regular property. Where you really got to get to people is, do you or do you not own your vehicle? Well, sure, it's paid for. Well, what about the annual property tax when you have to pay the government for the permission to own a vehicle, to own a trailer, to own a cow, to own a chicken, to own a goat, to own a farm tractor, to own a backhoe, and you start delving into that, and eventually people are either going to wake up, or that little BB that rolls around in their head in that empty void up there is never going to grasp the concept they own nothing. It is leased to you by the government for an annual fee.
Yeah, well, I kind of phrase the same way. It's like you're renting your property from the government. Why would you want to do that? Case in point, see here, the first year we moved into this house that we live in now, I told my wife, well, okay, we'll move to town because the real estate tax has finally dropped. I said, now I'm a little more comfortable. We weren't even here 2 or 3 months, and here comes, let's get a new water park. And I'm like, God, really? We just freaking got here. Now you're going to start this crap? And so the city said you have one way of doing it, and that's personal property tax. That's it. There's no sales tax, no nothing. You have plan A, no plan B. And I'm like, well, that's a fine how do you do? And so they said, well, everybody's going to pay, they're only going to pay $33 a year extra. But the company that I work for, the owner's wife, she dug in, she called Herman and said, how many people in Owensville actually get property tax bills? And they gave her a number, and when she figured it up in her head, it was going to be, I think, almost $100 a year extra. And she was going to meetings, and because they were bragging about other cities' water parks, they were leaving out important parts. One city's was paid for by a casino, and then another one said, oh, they made this much money their opening week or opening weekend. They neglected to say they had a high school swim meet there, and everybody had to pay an admittance fee. So they were leaving out all. Now it passed. People were like, well, we got to have something for the kids. And I was trying to explain to them, government is not in charge of entertaining your kids. That's your freaking job, not their job, not my job. I don't want to pay for your water park. But it's the same thing. It's like, what is wrong with you? You don't understand. And we have a lot of elderly people, a lot of people on fixed incomes that still own cars. So, yeah, they're going to get hit because they have a personal property tax bill that they're paying every year. And it just astounded me that the city only gave them one option. And then the number fudging that went on with this thing. And it's like, it's bad enough we have a personal property tax to begin with. And now because you want some fancy water park with a lazy river that I could give two craps less about, you want to throw even more on there. People really got irritated with me when I kind of, beat them up over it. But it's like, guys, why are you so anxious to raise your own taxes? I don't understand. So
think of how many ways that the government competes against the private sector. You got gyms, you got fitness centers, you got activity centers. Now I don't know what it's like in Owensville, but here in Springfield, we've got government financed and government operated fitness centers / gym. So not only am I paying a tax for that gym to be open, they also pay a membership fee, but I'm also they're using my tax money to advertise for the gym that's operated by the government when I have a private gym membership.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to say it was maybe 3 years ago, Senator Burleson actually introduced a bill that at a certain time frame, it was going to prevent the government from competing against any private entity within its political subdivision area. So, like the city of Owensville, if there's a fitness center in the city of Owensville, well, then the city of Owensville can't open a fitness center that's functionally operated off of tax money.
Oh,
it's ludicrous that a law like that even has to be passed to get these political subdivisions to comply with the very essence of how they were created. Without the state of Missouri, the political subdivisions don't exist.
Yeah, you say that. That's just like having to get laws like the Second Amendment Preservation Act. We shouldn't even have to think about having to write that law. But because the feds are so, power mad, we have to write a bill where it's inherently evident and a right enumerated in the Constitution shall not be infringed, but we have to pass a law in the state of Missouri to protect our gun rights because the feds want to play footsies with local police departments or state police departments.
Well, that just goes to tell you, in all sincerity, and if your feet fit on this limb, that's a you problem, not a me problem. But if you're stupid enough to vote and elect these people who do not understand what their job is when they swore their oath to uphold and to defend the Constitution as it is written, that's exactly what happens. Because to me, the Ninth Amendment in the U.S. Constitution is just as important as the Second Amendment is in the U.S. Constitution.
Absolutely. Okay, so another question. This is from Catherine. Do any legislators go to you prior to sponsoring a bill to see if it's constitutional? Do you have legislators contact you about those things?
I have actually asked a couple of legislators to write, or I've given them my thought process on what it is that I would like to see written legislatively. Because what ends up happening is if you ever read, when you start delving into legislation, you're going to read where they're taking a law, they're trying to insert words into it and to format it in a manner that it means the complete opposite of what it used to mean. And it gets infuriating when they attempt to do this, because the easiest thing to do is just to write a bill that eliminates the entire law. If the law is not on the books, there's nothing for them to enforce. Now, modern day political people will call that a loophole, but in reality, it's not a loophole. It's not against the law to do this. So I've had people that I've introduced a piece of legislation in my mind to them verbally and said, this is what I would like to see happen. To Mike Moon's credit, and I think you can understand why it is that he has 3 granite plaques and will end up getting many more, because I do believe that he will get 2020s and 2021s as well. He has sat through at least 2, maybe 3 of our Constitution classes. And if I'm not mistaken, he came to either 1 or 2 of our legislative committee review meetings, where he and his wife Denise just kind of sat off to the side and didn't say a word, but they listened to us argue through these pieces of legislation and whether or not it delved into the meaning and the verbiage of the state constitution. So he committed himself to being more constitutional from the very beginning, before he even decided to go up to Jefferson City. And I give him all the credit in the world. He has kept his learning process open, and he has constantly reached out and asked for things, or has reviewed things, which keeps his knowledge base continuing to open. There's this old saying that the mind is like a parachute. It only functions when it's open. If you're going into something closed-minded, you might as well forget it. You're going to continue to believe what you believe no matter what. But if you go into something and you're a little bit open-minded about it, to insert more knowledge or new knowledge into your head, it will start that ball rolling into other areas of your life. And with him, you can almost bet that 90% of what he votes on, if he says no, it's unconstitutional, and I can prove it.
Yeah, I'm super happy that, I mean, hate to say it, but not really hate to say it. I am super happy that he did not win his primary for the U.S. Senate. I'm glad that he is staying here in the state of Missouri, because we need more Mike Moons in the legislature for sure. So let's go into a little bit, because I know you do constitutional classes, and I have someone watching the live stream here that is wondering how they would go about getting a constitutional class that you teach near them.
Well, all they got to do is reach out to me. Right now, I'm in Facebook jail for 45 days, so they'd have to send me an instant message. But they could send me an instant message, tell me where it is that they live, and then if they take it upon themselves, they can schedule a venue, they can schedule a time, they can basically be the individual who promotes the event, and then I'll drive up there and present a Constitution class. I've got it broken down into 2 sections, because I think when we were doing this before, we just naturally assumed everybody understood how government functions and why it functions in the manner that it does. I found out that's incorrect. People don't understand the difference between a democracy and a republic. Why? Because our education system has told us they're the same thing for decades. They don't understand the difference between what a natural right is and what I do call is a constitutional right, which are those things that require some sort of a societal function in order for it to be prevalent, like voting or jury by a trial by a jury of your peers, those types of things that require a societal element. People have to understand and grasp where it is that their rights come from. They need to understand how it is to use the language appropriately. So when people say, one of the things that people jump on me about is, well, we need term limits. Now I'll look at them and say, we have them. Well, no, we don't. Well, yes, we do. They're called 2 years, 4 years and 6 years. That's a term limit. What you're looking for is a limitation of terms. You want to make the case that this person can only serve 4 of those 2-year terms, or 6 of those 2-year terms, or 6 of those 6-year terms. And I think it's important that, and our founders understood this, they knew and they understood how language is used means a lot, and we've lost that concept.
Okay. One other thing, I want everybody else to hear this because I've heard you talk about it 2 times, but a lot of folks haven't heard. Recommend to people the dictionaries that you carry around with you because you said those definitions are what the founders used of certain words or terminology. So go over with us the dictionaries that you believe people should be using today instead of the newer versions that we've got now.
I carry actually 4 books around with me. One is a Missouri Constitution, and of course it actually has the U.S. Constitution in the back. One of the best investments I ever made was the Samuel Johnson 1755 dictionary. It is the only dictionary that was in print prior to the Constitutions being written at the federal level, not the state level. States already had, or colonies pretty much already had charters or had constitutions. You can also go and get the 1828 Webster's Dictionary. Noah Webster's a founding father. If he doesn't understand what the words meant back when they were being used, nobody does. And I think it's important. There's another book that I also, and I listen to this guy's podcast. His name is Paul Engel, and he has a podcast called The Constitution Study. And I have listened to him probably now for probably about 2 years. I find him easy to listen to. I find his explanations easy to understand. And he also will tear apart court cases and how it is that the court's opinions and the justices' opinions deflect away from the original intent on why it was that the case was originally brought to the court. So basically, they've done nothing except they've deflected away from the original issue, and they've ruled on something or they've opined on something that literally the section of the Constitution being used was the wrong section and the reason it went to the court. So those are the 4 things I use.
It's interesting. You just said Paul Engel, and a friend of mine who spoke at Robert Smith's event, Jesse Rude, every year he does a thing on Constitution Day, and he's actually got Paul Engel scheduled to speak for about an hour during a live stream. It's pretty interesting. Okay. Now, I've got about 8 minutes before I have to cut off one section for a radio station. So I'm trying to think of another topic to bring up because there's one other topic I want to cover that you discussed towards the end of your talk at Catherine's event, and that is a ballot initiative on, I guess, changing the Constitution or having a constitutional convention here for the state of Missouri. And I kind of want to delve. You know what? Let's get started on it, and I can just cut it off. But explain to everybody what this amendment is about.
Well, there is a section in the Missouri Constitution that every 20 years, the people of the state of Missouri get to approve or disapprove of the current Constitution as it is written. This year in November is the year that the people of Missouri get to determine whether or not they still like the Constitution that governs the state of Missouri. It is my opinion that the Constitution that we are currently living under in this state, besides it being ignored wholesale by our legislative body, is entirely too large and has entirely too much stuff in it that regulate the people when in reality the Constitution is there to regulate the government. I believe that when that ballot initiative is asked, do you want to see the Missouri Constitution become null and void? Basically, don't forget it's still in play until the people approve another constitution. But there are things like bingo, stem cell research, medicinal marijuana, and I'm all for the legalization or the decriminalization for marijuana, weed. I don't care. It's a plant. Shouldn't even be a thought about it. But there are areas of our state constitution that need to be changed. The language needs to be written in a manner to make it so that people are held accountable. The revised statutes of Missouri is our legislators' laws that they use against us. They have a police force that they will send out and dispatch out to you when you are not following those laws. We have none of that in the state constitution. The only thing we can do is 2 years after our legislators violate the Constitution is kick them out of office.
Okay, so let's Catherine says she wants to keep the part where women don't have to women don't have to serve jury duty.
That is true. Article 1, Section 22B, a woman in the state of Missouri is exempt from serving on jury duty.
Until you said that at Robert's event, I had no clue. No, I'd never heard that before. It just blew my mind. Now, that is apparently a very dated part of the Constitution, I'm guessing. But it was just like I wouldn't even given that a thought that would exist in the state constitution. And what you said was, now that's actually, illegal because it's not, it's not equal amongst everybody. Basically, right? Because there's not equal treatment under the law. That's not really. I don't know.
Yeah, there literally are many areas of the state constitution that, if you want to put it phonetically correct, that are unconstitutional.
That's great. That's great. Hey, as part of this Constitution's unconstitutional. People are going to sit there and blink and like, what? Like, yeah, this part of the Constitution is unconstitutional.
Most of the areas of the enumerated Bill of Rights section from the Missouri Constitution comes from the Constitution of 1875. I do find it quite interesting that the Section 22B does not have a year underneath it as to when it was put into the Constitution. So that may have been 1945. They just don't say it.
Yeah, okay.
Because Section 29 is organized labor and collective bargaining. Do you know that you have the right to collectively bargain with your employer? And to do so through representatives of your own choosing, so you can be a union of one?
No, I had no idea. Okay, so like I said, I got about just under 3 minutes left. I'm just trying to fill some time, so I have to cut off.
Let me get back to that one question though, because I found what the law says about what the law is and an ordinance is.
Okay, go ahead.
That way people grasp the concept of why it is that we've gotten into this quandary. The legal definition of a law is a rule or a system of rules that regulate conduct and can be enforced by a country, state, or municipality. This is the umbrella term, and everything else falls within this category. Now, an act and a statute, these two mean the same thing. It's a written law enacted by a legislative body. For example, when a bill passes both the House and Congress, it's approved by the president, yada, 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 it becomes what's known as the United States Code. Here in Missouri, it's called the Revised Statutes of Missouri. They deem an ordinance is a local law or decree adopted by a municipality or a city-town government when a piece of legislation is enacted by a municipal authority, it becomes an ordinance, typically dealing with public safety, health, and general welfare. Ordinances often address fire and safety regulations, housing standards, parking regulations, snow removal, littering, public streets and sidewalks, and zoning. So they confined it to a little area of use. But within the confines of the state constitution, our local municipalities have not been granted that authority by the people. And then, of course, a regulation is the official rule with the weight of law. They're issued by administrative agencies that have legislative authority. I take deference to that because they really realistically have no legislative authority over a specific area and can create and enforce rules over that area. For example, the Safer Affordable Fuel Vehicles Rule is a regulation that's issued by the Environmental Protection Agency. If there is nothing within the confines of law that you can delve into that says Safer Affordable Fuel Efficient Vehicle Rule, they don't have the authority to do that.
Right.
The problem is our legislators will give them the authority to promulgate the rules by which these laws that they are passing will be enacted. They'll go out on a hook. They'll go on a fishing expedition and they'll create stuff that has nothing to do with the law that was created. And until somebody is absolutely fined or thrown in jail for violating one of them, you don't even know they exist.
All right. Now, give me just a second. So thanks to those of you in the KEYK area, and we'll see you next week. All right. So now I want to move on to this because this is one of those topics where I think everybody's there's a lot of people, it's like 50-50. And we talk about, do people want to basically dissolve the Constitution we have now? And, we create another constitution. Now, when you get into the topic of constitutional conventions, I've heard good arguments why you don't want them because of the rules, or actually the lack thereof of guidelines for delegates in the state and how we get those delegates to send them to a constitutional convention, and the fear that special interests are going to get entangled in there and really wreck things. What is your opinion on like a constitutional convention in the state of Missouri? Because these are concerns that I've heard a lot from a lot of different people.
Well, the state and the federal constitution remains the same until it is chosen by the people who are voting on it to change it. So you literally could go to the point where, let's say there is a constitutional convention that's called for in the state of Missouri. And I have not delved the whole way through all the rules and the regulations of this. So let's say there is crafted a constitution that gets put onto the ballot at the very next election, and that constitution fails. So we're still under the current one that we have. So you literally this could be taken out years and years and years, and you're still dealing with the same constitution that you've been dealing with since 1945.
Okay, because I know that I believe there was a House bill or a House Joint Resolution 132. Now, that was going to deal with ballot initiatives, but there were also, I believe, things set in place that gave specific rules for a constitutional convention. So as I think right now you get one Democrat and one Republican per Senate district, and then 15 at-large delegates. And that there were going to be some rule changes where I think it was going to be a little more strict. It was going to keep the special interests out, because there's a guy by the name of Robert Brown that I've interviewed a couple times. And he talks about constitutional conventions all the time. And he said, the thing is the legislature can choose to send so many people, but they're, and they say, well, there's a group, and I think they're called Convention of States or something like that. And they always say, "Oh, well, if their state legislators tell them they can only they're only sending them there for, let's say, some kind of Second Amendment thing. That's all they can do." Now, that's actually a lie, because when they get there, they can do anything they want because there is no oversight. And I just didn't know if that was, because that's a concern to a lot of people, that there's no oversight from the people themselves or the state government. They're there and they're behind closed doors and nobody knows what's going on. And I guess my other concern would be, how do we, if we were to do that and we were trying to write a new constitution, I guess the issue of educating people on, hey, this is a good constitution versus this is worse than the one we had, because we always talk about how people are kind of uneducated on a lot of things, talk democracy versus a republic or what have you. And so I guess I just have some trust issues. Now, I'm not going to disagree. I think our Constitution is jacked up. It just concerns me that there's no oversight except until the end when you can vote on it. But the problem is educating the people to say, yeah, this is better or this is worse, without money being involved and trying to sway public opinion. I don't know.
Trust me, I have trust issues big time. Because and I think what a lot of people don't understand is when the founders were called to Philadelphia, they were called to amend the Articles of Confederation. They were not called to completely do a rewrite of those documents. And sadly, we've been also educated to believe is to just go read the Federalist Papers, the Federalist Papers, the Federalist Papers. That'll explain everything. Well, no, I'm kind of a Patrick Henry type. I like the anti-Federalist side, because if you go and read the Constitution, you go and read the Federalist Papers, and then you go look at what it is that the anti-Federalists brought up and where it is that our government has gone, I think the anti-Federalist side was right much more than the Federalist side was. But if we're going to do something like this, let's do it on a small level before we attempt something on the larger level. I mean, I have the cure for Washington, D.C. It would just get me thrown in jail if I say what it is. So I will remain quiet on that application. But the last time the Constitution in Missouri was ratified, basically as a new one, was 1945. So it only goes back 70 years. And of course, it seems like every time that there's a movement afoot, 1875, what was that? That was the Civil War Reconstruction period. 1945, that was the Great Society. So you had another one. We need to swing that pendulum back to the point where the liberty and the freedom and the free market and the concepts of a free people are ensconced in what it is that everything does, and the punishments are dealt out to those who violate those areas.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you there, because good God. I don't know how else I could add to that, but good God, we watch every day, especially at the federal level, and it's blatantly obvious what they're doing, and no one pays a price for anything that goes against the Constitution or any federal law or any. Well, once in a while they'll make they'll roast somebody a little bit because, oh my goodness, just to keep the heat off everybody else. But it's blatantly obvious that they're crooked as the day is long. But there's no ramifications for anything they're done. They're so well protected. And when the whole thing with Hillary went down, and once in a while I listen to Sean Hannity so I can have a good laugh. And he's just, oh man, she's going to pay for this. We got all this. And I'm sitting in my head, I'm just in my car, in my head going, nothing's going to happen to that woman. You have to be naive or just flat out stupid to think that anything is going to happen to that woman. Nothing is going to. She's gotten away with it for this long. Do you think her having classified information on a private server is going to? nothing's going to happen. But again, this is why I'm so much more worried about the state than the federal government. I've given up on the feds because I think it's just that situation. There is no resolving the issues in D.C., but I believe that in the state of Missouri, we can do things here and get ourselves more freedom. But, yes, we have a lot of work to do. But so let me ask you, Tom, do you charge anything for your constitutional classes?
No, I do it by donation. I mean, we used to charge, and then I thought, pretty much the only we handed out a book as well, but I've gotten away from the book. I do hand out a homework assignment. So if somebody wants to take class 1, the only way they get to take class 2 is to complete the homework assignment, because the homework assignment delves into pretty much what class 2 starts teaching them. And if you're not willing to do that homework assignment, there was a group, I think it's in Tennessee, called Centers for Self-Governance with Mark Herr, and we had them here in Springfield probably like 4 or 5 different times, and we started taking they had a 5-segment Constitution class, and at the end of class 1, you had to write a term paper basically on something that you adamantly would fight for you would die for this. So I decided to write mine about individual liberty, individual freedoms, individual rights. So I turned the paper in. That allowed me to take class 2. At the end of class 2, had I known what the homework assignment was, I would have changed what I was doing for assignment number 1. Because assignment number 2, in order to take class 3, is you had to write the exact flip side of what it is that you wrote for a homework assignment on number 1. So now I'm having to write about societal rights, societal freedoms, and the individual has no rights, liberties, or freedoms without society. And to be able to grasp that, to put your head around that, you're making an argument against yourself, and you have to do it in a manner that's acceptable to the person that you're handing the homework assignment into. You can't just buzz through it and just jot down a bunch of words and you're good with that. You literally have to debate yourself in these homework assignments, and it is a eye-opening experience. That's why people ask me, what do you listen to all the time? I listen to more NPR than I listen to anything. And NPR to me has been, it's one of those things, depending on which show it is that's on and who it is that's on, I know they're coming from way out there in Never Never Land, according to the way I think. But it strengthens my resolve to continue with what it is that I'm doing, trying to educate people to the Missouri Constitution, why it is that you have to get control of your local school boards, you have to get control of your local government, and until you put people into positions of authority who understand and grasp the concept that they are to stay contained within the Constitution, you have not a prayer or a hope at state level or the federal level. Definitely not the federal level. I gave up on them a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay. So another question. I know you've mentioned. You're going to start a podcast soon? Is that correct on the Missouri State Constitution?
Yeah, I've got during my classes, everyone will ask me, "Well, how did you become so smart in the Constitution?" So, well, I read it, and what I would do is I would take certain sections of the Constitution for a week, and I would read it. So I would take like Article 1, Section 1, Article 1, Section 2, Article 1, Section 3, and Article 1, Section 4. And I would take 5 minutes out of my evening, and I would read that section of the Constitution from Sunday until Saturday. And then the following Sunday, I would take the next areas. And I know it's mind-numbing. When I got to the taxes part, and I got to the water bonds and the sewer bonds, and then stem cell research. Oh, my God, I understand why people can't read this. So I am going to basically do a book an audio book of the Missouri Constitution, probably the Arkansas Constitution, the Kansas Constitution, the Oklahoma Constitution. I may do all 50 of them by the time I'm done, but I'm definitely going to start on Missouri's Constitution. It will be an audio book. And I've already got the domain name or whatever it's called for the podcast already saved. So that's called State Constitutions. And then I'm also contemplating doing one during the legislative session to where we will review, or I will review bills verbatim on a podcast, point out the sections and the language of where it is that the bill goes awry and the area of the Constitution that it's in violation of.
Oh, you're going to be busy.
Well, I do a lot. I do a lot of listening to a lot of different podcasts. I also understand that in order to see, I've done a radio show here in Springfield for 10 years now on KSGF. It's every Friday from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. I do it three Fridays out of the month, and then John Lilly does one Friday out of the month. But we discuss these very issues, and one of the things that I have found in order to be good at what it is that you're doing, you have to go back and listen to yourself. I jokingly told Robert that one day when I was listening to your Missouri Liberty Report. And I jokingly said, hey, do you ever go back and listen to what it is that you say online? And he's like, well, where did I screw up? I said, no, that's not what I said. Do you ever go back and listen to yourself? It's how you improve. And it wasn't that long until he says, man, I say right an awful lot.
You know what? I hate listening to the sound of my own voice, but sometimes I find myself doing it because I'm like, wait, I don't remember everything that I asked, or I don't remember the answer to this question. I go back and I listen, and I'm kind of like you. I'm like, I should have asked that differently. I should have worded that a little differently. And dang, I forgot to ask him about this or that. Or my wife's like, hey, why didn't you ask him about this? It didn't even dawn on me, you know? So yeah, you're right.
I'll go back and I'll listen to the radio podcast and I'll think, well, why did you say that? Or why did you answer in that manner? You dummy, you knew that wasn't the answer. You can be your own harshest critic. And I think once you get comfortable doing something, then it will flow from you. And I think I'm now at that point where I can be comfortable enough behind a microphone. I'm not saying that my voice isn't annoying, because I think it is, but I think I'm comfortable enough behind a microphone to be able to read the Missouri Constitution and to answer people's questions about it, and also to do legislative review and to walk people through the process of how it is that they too can read legislation and they can reach out to their elected officials and say, look, you voted for this. This section here has nothing to do with this section over here. And a matter of fact, the original title doesn't have anything to do with either one of those two areas. Can you explain to me why it is that you voted on something that you know or should know that's unconstitutional?
So, are you going to make an announcement when your site goes live and all that stuff and your podcast starts?
Yeah, I will definitely send out announcements to those that I know will help me get out the announcement. I got to figure out how to plug in my mic, and I'm going to do one podcast first. I did one called Lunatic Fringe on Missouri Grassroots Radio, and I went back and listened to it, and oh my God, it was terrible. I had guests on, and I never even announced who it was that I was talking to. I would ask a question, they would answer, then I would ask another question, and they would answer. And, you know, there's this fine line between, you always have people who are fading in and out from your listening audience. So if I announced at the very beginning who I was talking to, they may have not come in at the very beginning. They're coming in at, like, say, 8-9 minutes past the hour. They have no clue who I'm talking to. So I learned a lot from going back and listening to those.
Yeah, you let me know when you're going live, and I will. I'll make sure I tell everybody about it, because I know myself, I will be tuning in and listening to those so I can educate myself on the Constitution. Now, I do have. We're going to do one last question here. And it says, in your opinion, is there any way you would strengthen the Second Amendment Preservation Act?
I need to preface this by saying it boggles my mind that we have to have a Second Amendment Preservation Act. But that being what it is, the only way that you could strengthen the Second Amendment Preservation Act in reality is to get the federal officials to abide by it. Because if I'm not mistaken, I know Kansas had one. And Kansas was worded a little bit differently, but I think they were allowing, if I remember correctly, they were allowing for suppressors to be manufactured as long as they stayed within the state of Kansas. You couldn't ship them over lines. They had to be sold in Kansas. So when the feds came in to bust these two guys, there was no legislators. There was no sheriff's office. There was no governor to help these two guys out. I think one of the biggest things about the Second Amendment Preservation Act is to educate the sheriff. And keep in mind, we do not have a constitutionally created sheriff. We have a legislatively created sheriff. But the fact that he is the highest elected official that is voted on in the county, that man or woman should know that when they are dispatched or they are called, their first priority is to secure the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness of the person who lives in their county against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And until they're educated in that manner, I don't know any other way to phonetically reword or word the Second Amendment Preservation Act to get it to mean something more than what it means right now. I'm looking for the Ninth Amendment Preservation Act, or what I call NAPA.
Explain to everybody what you're talking about.
The Ninth Amendment in the United States Constitution specifically states that just because a right is not enumerated in the Constitution doesn't mean that it's not a right. People take for granted, well, driving, that's a right. Well, traveling is not, or driving is a privilege. Well, traveling is a right. If I go from point A to point B to my grandmother's house in my vehicle, I'm traveling. If I'm driving, I'm doing it for pay. And the state of New Jersey was the first state that created a driver's license, and they done it for commerce reasons because of the taxi cab drivers. And then the next thing you know, the public safety argument was made. And the next thing you know, the commonplace driver's license was born. There's many things that right of conscience is another one. You know, the no shoes, no shirt, no service that you see everywhere plastered on all these different grocery stores and Dollar Generals and all these places. A lot of these places have no shoes, no shirt, no service. Go ask your everyday Joe or Jane on the street if that's a law, and I would bet you at least 80% of them are going to say yes, when in reality it's not. The business owner has made a decision that if you come into their establishment with no shoes, no shirt, you're not going to get any service. That's called right of conscience. I shouldn't have to bake the cake. Plain and simple. That's why I believe the Oregon case, if they would have challenged that on the violation of the Ninth Amendment instead of the First Amendment, it probably may have gone a little bit differently.
Yeah, I don't even want to get started on it, on that whole thing. It's crazy to me that, well, basically people think they can walk into your business and force you to do something against your will. And then the government sticks up for the people that, not the owners of the business, but for the customers. Now, I could see if they had paid for the cake and then they said, you're not getting a cake. That's different because now there's money involved and there was an agreement. But just being able, when there were other bakeries and everything else around, they could have went to a different bakery. Nope. So angry that they had to get government involved and say, no, you're going to, and get them to make a cake for them. And there was a show, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, and I can't even remember the name of the network now. But in the beginning, that one of their little promos would say, there are those who just want to be left alone and those who just won't leave them alone. Which one are you? And I love that saying. And in these instances where people want to get government involved in some transaction, it's like, okay, so apparently you're the person that just won't leave other people alone. There are a lot of, it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters as far as people on the left or the right, whatever side. I think the majority of people still want to be left alone. The problem is the people who don't want to leave others alone get the microphone, they get the airtime, and everyone kind of feels like they're being attacked, well, rightfully so. But we got to get people to the points like, okay, do you like being left alone? Well, sure I do. Fine. How about you do that for everybody else? Leave them alone. Stop bothering people. Get back. Personal property rights, the same thing. Your freedom ends where someone else's begins. Just it's a simple concept. That's my problem. In the grand scheme of things, freedom really is such an easy solution, and it's really easy to understand. But now it's so convoluted. The waters are muddied because of government meddling and media meddling that you just can't be free to make a choice that would only affect you without a middleman called government or some bureaucracy sticking its hand out wanting a portion of the proceeds. We got a lot of work to do as far as education, but I will talk to some folks around here. I would love to have you up here, Tom. I really would, but I'm going to be honest. We have a bad problem in this area of people just not wanting to participate or get involved in anything. I would love to have you up here to take a class or teach a class or two. I'm worried that you would drive up here for like 3 people, and to me that's just a waste of your time. I'd rather see a room full of people, not 3, 4, or 5. If I can ever cement something, go ahead.
I used to think that way too, but then I thought the other way. If those 3 people showed up just so they could get educated, who am I to say that they shouldn't be the ones who get that education? Because in reality, one of those 3 may be your superstar into creating a group up there that all of a sudden the next thing you know, that's the individual who creates your tax group or your this group or your that group, who all of a sudden then you got control of your local city government.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I will ask around. I mean, I know of a few people offhand that would definitely do it, and maybe I'll get in contact with you here in a little while, and because there's a few places around that we could do it with no issue, and get you up here for a Missouri State Constitution class. That'd be pretty awesome. Well, Tom, I appreciate your time greatly. Maybe here in another few months or so, or not even that long, if there's ever something you want to discuss, bring up, whatever, feel free to get in touch with me, and you've got a spot here on the show, and we can talk all things Missouri Constitution anytime you want.
Okay, and I want to let people know that on Constitution Day, September the 17th, I will be in Nevada, Missouri, and I will be doing level 1 of the Missouri Constitution class up at the Precision Coffee Company Class starts at 10. Please be there at 9:45. Class ends at 3. If you're lucky, you'll stop asking me questions by 5.
All right. Well, Tom, again, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. Appreciate the effort that you put forth. And I look forward to speaking to you again, sir.
All right, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you much.
Yep. Take care, man. All right, everybody. That was Tom Martz from the Locke and Smith Foundation. Interesting. I like talking to the guy. I like hearing what he has to say. I really do. And you really can't go wrong when you talk to somebody that knows the state constitution like the back of their hand. Now, it would be nice for some legislators, more legislators, to talk to someone like him and say, hey, am I doing this constitutionally or am I not? But, you can't have everything, but it is nice to know. So, yeah, definitely, if anybody watching right now or anything you can friend him. Well, if you can't friend him on Facebook right now because he's in Facebook jail and you want to get a hold of him and talk to him about a Constitution class, let me know, and then I will kind of forward your message to him, and maybe you guys can pass phone numbers out or whatever, and go about getting that set up. And I will think about it, just because he's not too worried about the number of people that show up. Maybe I can talk to Sam and Trish at Missouri Liberty Radio and see about it at some point. But again, I know it doesn't bother him, but it would bother me if he showed up and there's like 3 people there. There would be at least 4, my wife, myself, Sam and Trish would all probably be there. I can think of a few other people that would probably show up, but I don't want to, I don't want to feel like I'm wasting the guy's time. He's obviously doesn't have a problem with it, but I want to make it worth his while too. And it'd be great for people around here in my area to understand the Missouri State Constitution a little better and know what is right and what is wrong as far as legislation goes. So anyway, folks, again, to everybody in the live stream, thanks for joining in. Your questions, your comments, appreciate it. And next week, Catherine, if you're not busy and you want to talk about the Grain Belt Express, you let me know. If you want to come on next Friday, and we can talk about that. And then the following week on the 16th, I will have Tony Lavasco on with me. And maybe we'll get into a little bit of what's going on in the special session. And then I believe Patrick and I have it nailed down. The first Friday, starting in October, the first Friday of every month, Patrick will be joining me for a podcast, and we will discuss, anything and everything Missouri. And we're going to do that for however long. That's just Patrick and I talked about that, and that's something that I was very interested in when he asked me about it. So that's what we're going to do, and so looking forward to that as well. Yeah, Tom may be another one to bring on, and once a month or however often, to just discuss some bills that are coming through. And that just depends on how much time he has. With him doing possibly 2 podcasts, he may not have the time for that. It's something to look into. I'd love to keep having guests on every week, and that way, you don't just have to listen to me talk. We can, I can get informed, you can get informed, and I think everybody enjoys me having guests on than me just talking. But that's neither here nor there. So anyway, thanks again for joining me. Next week, maybe Catherine will join me. If not, we'll figure out something. And then the 16th, Tony Lavasco. And also, I am trying to get Daniel Miller from the Texas Texas Nationalist Movement on Texas, because I think, even though people might not agree with me, I think we need to discuss what some people call a national divorce. The dirty word is secession, but national divorce. I'm also trying to get a hold of Eric Peters from Eric Peters Autos. The guy knows everything about automobiles, but he is also very freedom-oriented. Also trying to get that lined up to see if I can get him on pretty soon. And I still got to get in touch with Michael Bolden from the 10th Amendment Center, try to get him on. And I'm always looking for more guests, so if anybody out there knows of anyone, I got to get Robert back on at some point as well. But if you know of anybody else, give me a holler, let me know. I'll be happy to get in touch with them and have them on. But and also for my listeners, don't forget to check out MOLibertyRadio.us. That's MO for Missouri, LibertyRadio.us. Also, don't forget Saturday nights at 7:30. Look up Missouri Freedom Initiative on YouTube. Follow the live stream. Join in. Make comments. Ask Patrick questions and the rest of the group. I generally try to make those every week. There are some times that I miss them, and normally it's for a photography shoot. That's about the only time I miss out. But, yeah, make sure you check those MOLibertyRadio.us, especially on Sunday nights at 7 o'clock with Sam and Trish Britton, Off the Cuff Radio. Don't want to miss that. It's a good show. Now, this week, Sam will not be doing a show, but next week he will. All right? So keep that in mind. And we will see you all next week. Have a great weekend. Happy Labor Day. Enjoy your 3-day weekend if you get one. And we'll see you all on Friday. Oh, by the way. Oh, never mind. I can just talk to live stream. Anyway, have a great week, everybody. By the way, folks, I talked to Patrick and what Tony Lovasco is doing with the the recreational marijuana thing for the special session. Let's not, because really to get it done is going to be nigh impossible. I think Tony's, what he's really trying to do, because even he admits it's a long shot, what he's really trying to do is get out how bad Amendment 3 is so we can get it voted down in November. I think that's the main thing on the agenda. So let's focus on getting the sales tax off of groceries. After the special session, let's work on getting Amendment 3 shot down and voted no. And then we will put a lot of effort into getting a bill like what Ron Hicks had back into the legislation and pushing that through. And go from there. So let's not bog the phone lines down on marijuana just yet. But next legislative session, if we get Amendment 3 knocked down, which more and more groups I'm seeing are coming out of the woodwork to push Amendment 3 down and get it destroyed at the ballot box. I think there's still lawsuit pending that there weren't enough signatures for that to be on the ballot too. So there's court things going on right now, and more groups are coming in to fight Amendment 3. So let's focus on the sales tax on groceries and some other things like that in this special session, and we'll work on marijuana legislation the next actual legislative session, all right? Appreciate each and every one of you. Hope you all, again, have a great 3-day weekend.